I discovered the secret to happiness at 70. Find out how. Ever wondered what the secret to lasting happiness is? At 70, I finally uncovered the answer, and I'm here to share my journey with you. It's not in wealth, achievements, or even other people. It's something deeper, something far more personal. Let me take you through how I found my way to a happiness that doesn't fade, and how you can too. For much of my life, like many of you, I believe happiness came from external sources. I worked hard, raised a family, and pursued milestones society told me were essential. And yes, those moments brought joy. But as the years went by, I found myself searching for something more. At 70, I had a realization. I had spent too much time looking outward for fulfillment and too little looking inward. It was time for a change. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. 1. Happiness starts within. For so many years, I looked for happiness in all the wrong places. I chased it through achievements, possessions, and even relationships, believing they held the key to fulfillment. And while they brought fleeting moments of joy, they never lasted. There was always something missing, a quiet emptiness that lingered when the novelty wore off or when life returned to its usual rhythm. It took me 70 years to understand that what I was searching for could never be found outside myself. Happiness, I've learned, is not something you achieve or acquire. It's something you cultivate within. This realization didn't come easily. Like many of you, I grew up in a world that placed so much emphasis on external success, how much you earned, what kind of house you lived in, or whether you had the perfect family. And while these things are important, they are not the foundation of true lasting happiness. When I finally stopped and looked inward, I began to see the patterns that had kept me stuck for so long. I had given away my emotional power. If someone praised me, I felt elated. If they criticized or ignored me, I felt crushed. My happiness was at the mercy of others, and I didn't even realize it. The first step toward reclaiming my happiness was accepting this truth. No one, not my family, not my friends, not even the most loving partner, could fill the emptiness I felt inside. That void wasn't theirs to fill. It was mine to understand and nurture. It was a humbling revelation, one that came with both grief and hope. I grieved the years I had spent chasing external validation, but I also felt an immense sense of freedom. For the first time, I understood that my happiness was within my control. This shift in perspective didn't happen overnight. It took time, reflection, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about myself. I realized how often I had sought distractions to avoid being alone with my thoughts. I relied on others to keep me entertained or to validate my worth, and when they couldn't meet my expectations, I felt disappointed or even resentful. But the more I leaned into this discomfort, the more I began to see that it wasn't loneliness I feared. It was my own company. Learning to be at peace with myself was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. I started small, taking moments each day to sit quietly and reflect on what brought me joy. Not in the past or in the hypothetical future, but in the present. I found happiness in the simplest things: the warmth of the morning sun on my face, the sound of birds outside my window, the quiet rhythm of my breathing. These moments reminded me that happiness isn't something you wait for. It's something you create moment by moment. This isn't to say that external things, relationships, achievements, possessions, don't matter. They do. But they are complements to your happiness, not the source of it. When you rely solely on others to fill your emotional needs, you give away your power. And when those external sources falter, as they inevitably do, you're left feeling unmoored. By finding happiness within, you build a foundation that no one and nothing can shake. This understanding changed everything for me. It allowed me to approach relationships with a sense of balance and freedom. I could enjoy the love and connection others offered without clinging to it or fearing its loss. I could give without expecting something in return, knowing that my happiness was no longer dependent on anyone else's approval or affection. At 70, I finally discovered that the greatest secret to happiness isn't found in what others give you, but in what you give yourself. It's in the kindness you show yourself on hard days, the patience you offer when things don't go as planned, and the joy you cultivate in the quiet, ordinary moments of life. If there's one truth I hope you take from this, it's that happiness starts with you. Not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, but right now. You already have everything you need to begin. Look inward, and you'll find that the happiness you've been searching for has been with you all along, waiting for you to notice it. 2. Finding purpose in this season of life. As the years go by, life has a way of changing its rhythm. The once busy days of raising a family, building a career, or chasing dreams gradually give way to quieter moments. For many of us, this transition brings a profound question: what now? When the familiar roles we've played for decades, parent, worker, provider, begin to fade, it's natural to feel a sense of loss or uncertainty. I felt it too. But what I discovered is that this stage of life, far from being the end of purpose, is actually an incredible opportunity to redefine it. For much of my life, my purpose was tied to what I did for others. Like many people my age, I found meaning in being needed by my children, my spouse, my coworkers. My days were filled with responsibilities and tasks that gave me a sense of direction. But when those roles shifted, I found myself wondering, who am I now? Without those roles to anchor me, I felt adrift, as though the best parts of my life were behind me. What I didn't realize at the time was that purpose is not confined to a single role or stage of life. It's not something you outgrow or leave behind. Purpose evolves just as we do. And at this stage of life, it's not about being needed by others. It's about reconnecting with yourself and discovering what truly lights you up. I'll be honest, this wasn't an easy realization for me. At first, I struggled to see how I could contribute or feel valuable without the roles I'd always known. But then I began to ask myself questions I hadn't considered in years. What excites me? What have I always wanted to try but never had the time for? What do I want to leave behind as my legacy? These questions, though daunting at first, opened a door I hadn't even realized was there. I started small, dipping my toes into new activities that piqued my interest. I joined a local senior community and found joy in the simple act of connecting with others who were on similar journeys. We laughed over games, shared stories during yoga sessions, and built bonds that reminded me of how much we all crave connection. These small steps reignited a spark in me, showing me that purpose doesn't have to be grand or world-changing to be meaningful. From there, I began exploring hobbies I had set aside years ago. I picked up a paintbrush for the first time in decades, let my hands get messy with clay, and even tried my hand at writing, something I'd always been curious about but never pursued. Each new activity brought a sense of excitement and discovery that reminded me of being a child, full of wonder and possibility. But finding purpose isn't just about hobbies or activities. It's about feeling like your days have meaning, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. For me, that meant giving back to others in small but significant ways. I started volunteering at a local shelter, mentoring young people who reminded me of my own grandchildren. These interactions filled me with a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in years. They reminded me that no matter our age, we have so much wisdom, kindness, and experience to share. Perhaps the most surprising thing I learned is that purpose doesn't have to be singular. It's not just one thing. It's a mosaic of moments, connections, and contributions that come together to create a life of meaning. Some days, my purpose is as simple as lending a listening ear to a friend or helping a neighbor. Other days, It's diving into a project that challenges and excites me. Each piece, no matter how small, adds to the richness of this stage of life. One of the greatest joys of finding purpose at this age is the freedom it brings. For the first time in decades, I wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations or schedules. I could explore what made me happy, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. That sense of freedom, of living life on my own terms, was exhilarating. It reminded me that this season of life is not a time of decline, but of renewal. If you're reading this and feeling unsure about what's next, I want you to know this. You are not alone. It's never too late to rediscover your purpose. Whether it's through a new hobby, a community group, volunteering, or simply reconnecting with what makes you feel alive, there is always a way forward. The key is to start small. Take one step and then another. Let curiosity guide you. And most importantly, give yourself permission to grow and change. At 70, I've come to see this season of life as a gift, a chance to look inward, to try new things, and to live with intention. Purpose isn't something we lose as we age. It's something we have the opportunity to redefine. And in that process of rediscovery, we often find not just purpose, but a renewed sense of joy and fulfillment. So, to anyone wondering, what now? I say this. Now is the time to explore, to reconnect, and to live with purpose. You've already lived a life full of stories and experiences. Let this chapter be one where you create, connect, and find meaning in ways that bring you true happiness. 3. Connection without dependence. As we grow older, the importance of human connection becomes clearer than ever. Relationships, whether with family, friends, or our communities, are the threads that weave the fabric of our lives. Yet, with age, these threads sometimes loosen, children move away, friends pass on, and the pace of life slows. In this quieter phase, it's natural to long for connection, but it's equally important to ensure that these relationships are balanced, healthy, and built on mutual respect, not dependence. For many years, I didn't realize how much of my emotional well-being I placed in the hands of others. I depended on their presence, approval, and attention to feel valued. When those relationships flourished, I felt on top of the world. But when they faltered, I felt unmoored, as if my worth was tied to someone else's mood or actions. It was an exhausting cycle, one I didn't recognize until much later in life. I learned the hard way that while connection is vital, dependence can become a trap. It's easy to mistake needing someone for loving them, or to assume that our happiness lies in their hands. This mindset, though understandable, places an unfair burden on our relationships, and often leaves us feeling disappointed or resentful. True connection, I've come to realize, is about sharing joy, not demanding it, offering support, not requiring it. Breaking this cycle wasn't easy. It required me to look inward and ask some tough questions. Why was I relying so much on others to fill my emotional gaps? Why did I feel restless or unfulfilled when I was alone? These questions were uncomfortable at first, but they opened the door to a deeper understanding of myself. I realized that my fear of loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about not knowing how to be content with my own company. Once I acknowledged this, I began to approach relationships differently. I stopped expecting others to complete me or fix the parts of my life that felt empty. Instead, I focused on nurturing the connection I had with myself. I spent time rediscovering my own interests and learning to enjoy solitude. Slowly but surely, I began to see relationships as enhancements to my happiness, not its foundation. This shift in perspective transformed the way I related to others. Instead of seeking constant reassurance or attention, I started showing up in relationships as a whole person, someone who could give as much as they received. I found joy in simply being present, in listening, in sharing laughter without expectation. The pressure I had once placed on my loved ones to meet my emotional needs dissolved, and our relationships grew stronger as a result. I also realized the value of boundaries in fostering healthy connections. For so much of my life, I'd struggled to say no, afraid of disappointing people or seeming unkind. But as I began to respect my own emotional needs, I saw how important it was to set limits, not out of selfishness, but out of self respect. Boundaries allowed me to show up authentically in my relationships without resentment or exhaustion. As I worked on balancing my connections, I also sought new ways to expand my social circle. Loneliness is a common challenge as we age, but it doesn't have to define this stage of life. I joined local groups, attended workshops, and volunteered at community events. These experiences not only introduced me to new people, but also reminded me of the joy that comes from being part of something larger than myself. One of the most profound lessons I learned during this journey is that connection thrives when it's rooted in gratitude. Instead of focusing on what others could give me, I began to appreciate the simple, everyday moments we shared: a kind word, a shared laugh, a warm embrace. Gratitude shifted my perspective and deepened my appreciation for the relationships I had. Today, I cherish the connections in my life, but I no longer rely on them to define my happiness. I've learned to be my own anchor, to find joy and peace within myself. This independence doesn't diminish the importance of relationships, it enhances them. It allows me to love freely, without fear or expectation, and to give generously, knowing that my happiness is no longer tied to anyone else's actions. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's the understanding that connection is a gift, not a guarantee. It's something we nurture and treasure, but it's not something we depend on to feel whole. By building a strong relationship with yourself, you create a foundation for all the other relationships in your life to flourish. And in doing so, you discover a deeper, more fulfilling kind of connection, one that brings joy without conditions and love without limits. 4. Embrace change and growth. As we journey through life, one thing remains constant: change. Yet for many of us, the prospect of change becomes more daunting as we age. The routines we've built, the roles we've played, and the comfort of familiarity create a sense of stability that feels difficult to let go of. But what I've learned at 70 is this: the willingness to embrace change is not just a path to growth, it's a gateway to renewed joy and purpose. For much of my life, I resisted change. I clung to what I knew, believing that holding on to the past would keep me grounded. But as the years passed, I began to see how this resistance was holding me back. Life continued to shift around me. Children grew up, friends moved away, and the world itself evolved at a pace I sometimes struggled to keep up with. The more I resisted, the more isolated and stuck I felt. It was as though I was trying to stand still in a river that was always flowing forward. The turning point came when I asked myself a simple but profound question: what am I afraid of losing? The answer wasn't the memories or the relationships or even the routines themselves. It was my sense of identity. I had tied so much of who I was to the roles I had played: parent, worker, spouse, that I was afraid of what would remain when those roles changed. But what I discovered was that my identity wasn't lost, it was simply waiting for me to redefine it. This realization was both liberating and humbling. It reminded me that life is not a series of static moments to be preserved, but a dynamic, ever changing journey to be embraced. And while change can be uncomfortable, it also brings opportunities to learn, to grow, and to discover new parts of ourselves. So I made a choice. Instead of fearing change, I would lean into it. I would approach it with curiosity, asking not, why is this happening to me? But rather, what can I learn from this? This shift in mindset transformed the way I saw the world. It allowed me to see change not as an ending, but as a new beginning, a chance to write the next chapter of my life with intention. One of the most powerful lessons I learned was that growth doesn't stop with age. Society often sends the message that our later years are a time of decline, a slow retreat into the background. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Our later years are a time of incredible potential, a time to explore, to reflect, and to create in ways we may not have been able to during our busier years. I began to challenge myself to step outside my comfort zone, even in small ways. I learned to use technology that once intimidated me, discovering how it could connect me with loved ones and open up a world of knowledge. I took up hobbies I had always been curious about but never pursued, like watercolor painting and gardening. Each new experience, no matter how small, reminded me of the thrill of learning and the joy of discovery. One of the most surprising things I found was how much these small acts of growth influenced my outlook on life. They gave me a renewed sense of agency and confidence. Instead of seeing myself as too old for something, I started to ask, why not? This simple question opened doors I hadn't even considered, doors to new friendships, new skills, and new passions. But embracing change isn't just about trying new things. It's also about letting go of what no longer serves you. This can be one of the hardest parts of growth, especially when it involves releasing long held beliefs, habits, or even relationships. For me, letting go meant acknowledging that some parts of my life, though cherished, were complete. It wasn't about forgetting or dismissing them, but honoring them as beautiful chapters in a story that still had many pages left to be written. I also came to understand that change doesn't always have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Sometimes it's the small, quiet adjustments, the way we approach our mornings, the way we speak to ourselves, the way we choose gratitude over regret that have the most profound impact. Growth is not about becoming someone entirely new. It's about becoming more fully yourself. What I want to share with you is this. Embracing change is not about losing what you've built. It's about building on it. It's about carrying forward the wisdom and experiences of your life while remaining open to the possibilities that lie ahead. It's about understanding that you are not defined by your past or constrained by your age. You are always capable of growth, always capable of learning, and always capable of becoming. At 70, I've come to see change not as something to be feared, but as something to be celebrated. It reminds me that life is still vibrant, still full of potential, still worth waking up for with a sense of wonder. And while the journey isn't always easy, it's always worth it, because in every change, there is an invitation, a chance to grow, to connect, and to rediscover the beauty of being alive. 5. Gratitude is the ultimate happiness tool. It's easy to take life for granted. Days pass, routines form, and we sometimes lose sight of the beauty in the ordinary. But as I've grown older, I've come to understand that gratitude is not just a fleeting feeling. It's a way of seeing the world, a lens through which life becomes richer, fuller, and more meaningful. At 70, I've discovered that gratitude is the foundation of true happiness, and it has transformed the way I live. Gratitude didn't come naturally to me at first. Like many people, I often focused on what was missing in my life rather than what was present. I dwell on regrets, on opportunities I thought I'd lost, on the loved ones who were no longer with me. These thoughts weighed heavily on my heart, making it hard to see the blessings that surrounded me. I realized that without gratitude, I was robbing myself of joy. The turning point came during a particularly difficult time. I felt disconnected and unfulfilled, as though the best parts of my life had already passed. One morning, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. The simplicity of that moment struck me. The warmth of the sun, the quiet of the morning, the smell of freshly brewed coffee. It was nothing extraordinary, but it was everything. In that moment, I felt deeply grateful just to be alive, to experience the small wonders of a new day. From that day forward, I began a daily practice of gratitude. Each morning, I'd take a few minutes to reflect on the things I was thankful for. At first, it was the obvious blessings: my health, my family, the roof over my head. But as time went on, I began to notice the smaller, often overlooked gifts: the sound of birds singing, the feel of a soft blanket, the joy of a shared smile. Gratitude turned these ordinary moments into treasures, reminding me that happiness isn't found in grand achievements or possessions. It's woven into the fabric of everyday life. Gratitude taught me to live in the present. For so much of my life, I had focused on the past or worried about the future. I carried the weight of old mistakes, missed opportunities, and what ifs. But gratitude grounded me in the here and now. It reminded me that the only moment we truly have is the present, and it is in this moment that happiness resides. What I've also learned is that gratitude is not just a private practice, it's something we can share with others. Expressing gratitude to the people around us strengthens our relationships and deepens our connections. I started making it a habit to thank the people in my life, not just for big gestures, but for the little things: a kind word, a helping hand, or simply their presence. These expressions of gratitude not only brought joy to them, but also filled me with a profound sense of fulfillment. Gratitude doesn't mean ignoring life's challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's not about denying pain or difficulties. It's about choosing to see the good alongside the struggles. There were days when gratitude felt harder to summon, when losses weighed heavily on my heart. On those days, I learned to look for even the smallest flicker of light: the memory of a loved one that brought a smile, the resilience I found in myself to face another day, the comfort of knowing I was still here, still growing. This practice of gratitude changed how I approach challenges. Instead of viewing difficulties as burdens, I began to see them as opportunities to learn and grow. I realized that even in hardship, there is something to be grateful for: a lesson, a moment of clarity, or the strength to keep going. Gratitude doesn't eliminate pain, but it softens it, offering a perspective that helps us move forward with grace and resilience. One of the greatest gifts of gratitude is that it fosters contentment. In a world that often tells us we need more success, more possessions, more validation, gratitude reminds us that we already have enough. It shifts our focus from scarcity to abundance, from longing to appreciation. It teaches us to find joy in what we have rather than constantly chasing what we don't. At 70, I can say with certainty that gratitude is the most powerful tool for happiness I've ever discovered. It doesn't require wealth, youth, or perfect circumstances. It's available to all of us in every moment if we choose to embrace it. Gratitude has shown me that life is a gift, even in its imperfections, and that happiness is not something we find, it's something we create. To anyone reading this, I encourage you to begin your own gratitude practice. Start small. Take a moment each day to reflect on what you're thankful for. Write it down, say it out loud, or simply hold it in your heart. Over time, you'll find that gratitude becomes a habit, a way of seeing the world that brings light to even the darkest days. Gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a way of being. It's the choice to focus on what's good, to appreciate the beauty of the present moment, and to carry that sense of thankfulness into everything you do. It is truly the ultimate happiness tool. The secret to happiness. At 70, I've come to understand that happiness isn't about achieving a perfect life. It's about embracing the life you have, finding meaning in the everyday, and nurturing the things that make your heart full. Happiness isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's in the small, consistent choices we make every day to live with intention, gratitude, and love. To all of you reading this, I encourage you to take the first step. No matter your age or circumstances, it's never too late to discover the happiness that's been waiting inside you all along. Thank you for letting me share my journey. I hope it inspires you to begin your own. These lessons are meant to inspire you to live fully and authentically. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned and plan to apply in your own life. Let's support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment with 1. If not, feel free to comment with 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life on your own terms.